Most books about climate change tend to fall into either one of two categories, either scientific or political, or some combination of the two. This book I just read, though, The Great Derangement, doesn't quite fit into either very neatly. The author is neither a scientist nor explicitly political, although he definitely has political opinions, like I think pretty much anyone does. His name is Amitav Ghosh. He's a writer, a novelist, I would say mostly. I haven't read any of his books, so I can't really judge the quality of them, although he does include some excerpts in this book. So what he's really dealing with isn't so much, like I said, the politics or even the science of climate change. He's looking at more of the narrative about how we even look at the concept of climate change itself. This is a short book divided into three parts. The first part is really about that narrative. I think the second part was history, the history of coal, oil, and colonialism, things like China, the one-child policy, and how these have all influenced climate change. So he has, as a author who is largely based in India, but also in the United States, it seems like he has homes in both. That was kind of the impression I got. It does give you a good perspective, but it is really Asian-based, his perspective, I would say, more than anything. And he, I wouldn't say incriminates, but the fact that so much of Asia is transitioning to, or trying to transition to a Western, quote-unquote, lifestyle in which everybody has a car, a big house, refrigerator, and all these things that we associate with luxury in the West. And that is really, if everybody on the planet had these things, we would destroy the planet like overnight. So in some ways, he points out that it's almost fortunate that colonial powers held on to things like India and other areas of the world for so long, and that China didn't have an entirely democratic process involved with the one-child policy, because by limiting their population growth, it sounds undemocratic. Like the idea of that happening in the US sounds horrible, but as the planet as a whole, that has actually benefited us. So it's a very ambiguous thing. And now that these things are starting to fall away, what are we going to face and how are we going to deal with that? That is part of the problem. He even has these thought experiments saying, what if colonial rule had fallen away sooner? Would the rest of the world look more like the United States? And would climate change have happened more dramatically at an earlier rate? It's hard to say. I like this guy's writing style. It's very soft. I don't know if that makes sense until you read it. When he writes the nonfiction, he includes these excerpts from his novels that sometimes they seem to make sense and work. Sometimes they seem kind of pointless and nothing more than just advertisements for his novels. I think they could have been left out, TBH. And this is a short book that probably might even have been even shorter, or even a magazine article. I guess it was converted from lectures that he gave, and I enjoyed the book, but his writing style was good, but his arguments, while I can kind of feel them, they were murky at times, and by the time he finished, I didn't feel that he had grounded them in a strong argument. They just feel like thought experiments and things that he's trying out, but they don't feel quite complete. But I did get a lot of interesting ideas from the book. I can recommend it if you are interested in either the scientific aspects of climate change, which it's really this framework that we're putting around it and how we approach disasters and things like the imminent disaster of our planet, which we could be going completely downhill, or we could just be facing a bottleneck. Only the future will know. But this the narrative of that he sees as a novelist, I appreciate that, and I did enjoy that first section more than the other two. The way that we frame disasters, the way that we frame these things that are almost larger than life and form, they define our epoch, that the idea that we could destroy ourselves with climate change, with nuclear weapons, with disease warfare and all these other things. So it's, I did like that first section a lot. Maybe I can just read that part. He talks a lot about this event that happened when he was younger, I believe in Kolkata in India, when there was a tornado, which is an unheard of event, but he was there right at the moment and he got to see this tornado. And he was thinking about, what are the odds of this happening? And he talks a lot about how the effects of these once-in-a-lifetime weather events could be increasing, and how that forces us to confront these issues and say, like, okay, this is a disaster that is unheard of. And the way that we framed it up to now is almost like science fiction, like climate change is this fictional thing in the future that we could frame the after effects of it, like movies like Waterworld or comics like Sea Guy. But the present is happening, and we don't have a lot of fiction about climate change. He asks, why is that? And he doesn't really come up with a good answer. I mean, I don't know if there is an answer, but he forces us to think about why that is, because this is something that's happening. Islanders are losing their homes, and other things are happening, and maybe we have to wait until Manhattan's under 3 feet of water, and there are canals like Venice before we actually get modern fiction about it. It's so easy for people to just ignore climate change if it's not at their doorstep, and for a lot of people in the West, it's not, aside from hotter summers, colder winters. It's very easy to say, well, that's just life, that's difficult, but to connect it directly to their actions is something that people still have trouble doing. So climate change is at our doorstep, and this book is, if you're interested in climate change, then yeah, this is a great book to read and worth reading. Otherwise, I think most people are more interested in the scientific or political aspects of it, which this book doesn't quite focus on.